Your Majesties, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for always returning. Trust you and yours are well, and you are loving yourself and others like always. Many thanks to all of you for the support you give to the channel. Thank you so much to our channel members, to our anonymous supporters, to all of you, my esteemed subscribers. You are loved, celebrated, and appreciated. I am grateful to all of you for your show of love. Sometimes I'm like, do I deserve most of this love that you show to me? By leaving comments there, by sharing our videos, by giving thumbs up, Your Majesties. Thank you all so much. Okay, so today I want to take your mind to the traitors of the motherland. Now, throughout the history of the continent, there will be a lot that we'll begin to do. Now, there are books I want to introduce to you, and we analyze these books together. Okay, there are lots of books about the motherland and a lot of secrets that I want us to start delving into about the history of the continent of Africa and why Africa is in the state that Africa is today. You discover that we've been putting a lot of effort in terms of talking, okay, in terms of the little practicals that we do apart from the theories, in terms of, okay, we now know this person is the best one that can pull us out of this I don't know, of this trap that we are in. And then we discover that when that person comes, or whenever we utilize what we think is the best, we discover that things are not working as it should be. Lots of questions keep arising. Why are they the way they are? They are the way they are because there's a lot of things in history that we have forgotten, especially when it comes to the motherland. There's a lot of things about our histories that we have thrown away. And it is high time we begin to return back. We begin to go back to these histories of ours and do more excavation and check why things was the way they are so that we can look for solution. Because if we don't know the source of our problems, how do we get to the solutions of these problems that we have? It's unfortunate, and it is a fact that most of those we see as heroes most of the times are those that even put us in the predicaments that we are in today. Now, why do you think they fell into the trap of the enemy? We will gradually begin to go back and get to see why things are the way they are. But I want to bring your mind to the fact that we have traitors. And the motherland is in the state the motherland is today is because they are traitors. Okay? They are people who sold the continent out of, like, they deliberately sold the motherland. When I say selling, spiritually, they sold the continent. Physically, they sold the continent. Because when you look at how our resources are being taken away by the Europeans, there was a time that our people had the power. What did they do with the power that they had? Your Majesties, there was a time that our people had the choice, like they had the opportunity to say, no, we are not doing this with you. Okay, this is what we want. But they still decide to dance along with the Europeans, to dance along, dance to the tune of the colonial masters. Why are things the way they are? Because they are traitors. Self-hate. You know, if you've been here on this channel, I've been talking a lot about self-hate. We've done a lot of things about that. The moment you begin to hate your brothers, and that's why I keep talking about this petty hate amongst African countries has to stop. All these petty hate and petty draggings, whether it's on the internet alone, I don't want to know. It has to stop. Because it is from all this internal little conflict that the enemy gets hold of us. Oh my goodness, there's something biting me out here. Okay, it is from the little insignificant conflicts that we have amongst ourselves that the enemy get hold of, and we are put in a state where we will have to betray our own brother so that we can get to a position. This is exactly what was the situation of most of those who were ancestors of those times, and how they played this dirty game of politics among themselves, and the continent is what it is today. I'm going to leave you with the traitors of the motherland around the continent and remind you of how they betrayed one another. Why am I bringing this up here? I'm bringing it up here so that we all will be aware of the fact that it is in our division that the enemy progresses and succeeds. And they are so cunning in a way that they can use you against your brother. And it happens because you gave consent. Remember, I keep saying it, nothing happens if you do not give consent, physically or spiritually. It's because there is hate in our hearts against our brothers and sisters. There is jealousy against our brothers and sisters, especially when it comes to, okay, who can do this job? When we know that we cannot do it, we force ourselves into it. So I'll leave you with these and you enjoy.
See that man? The black guy there in the middle? His name is Mobutu. He was the African leader who collaborated with the US and Belgium to capture and arrest one of the most vibrant Pan-Africanists, Patrice Lumumba, in 1961, during the early days of independence. Mobutu then sent Lumumba to another power-hungry puppet, Moise Tshombe, who, along with his associates, assassinated Lumumba in the cruelest way you can ever think of.
Tshombe is the murderer of Lumumba, who was the rightful prime minister of the Congo. Tshombe is the man whose forces fought against the United Nations forces and against the United States, and despite this criminal past of Tshombe, now the United States is backing Tshombe, who has hired South African mercenaries, who are hired killers to disrupt the peaceful efforts of the freedom fighters from Stanleyville to make the type of country there that they want. And it is this American support of Tshombe, actually, that's at the root of the whole problem.
And this man you see is Blaise Compaoré, the man who orchestrated the assassination of his friend and military leader of Burkina Faso, Thomas Sankara. He went on to lead the country for almost 3 decades, returning it to colonial exploitation.
La vérité judiciaire vient nous édifier sur les responsabilités individuelles du président Compaoré, du général Diendéré et autres sur l'assassinat prémédité du capitaine Sankara et de ses collaborateurs.
Here is Emmanuel Bojol, who, under the direction of Ayadema Gnassingbé, led the coup that overthrew and killed Sylvanus Olympio of Togo. Ayadema went on to rule Togo for 38 years. What about Moussa Traoré, who ousted the first elected president of Mali, Modibo Keïta, and sent him to prison where he later died? Then there is Jean Bedel Bokassa, who overthrew his cousin David Dacko, the first president of the Central African Republic, and later made himself emperor. This list of betrayers and traitors doesn't stop here. There is also Inocencio Kani, who killed Amilcar Cabral of Guinea-Bissau, and many others. There is a West African adage among the Yoruba that goes, if the death within doesn't kill one, the one from outside won't. This means that if you have no enemies or betrayals within your home or circle, it will be difficult for enemies from outside to get to you. It was through these selfish, self-centered, and power-hungry individuals that the West was able to get rid of post-independence Pan-Africanists and anti-colonialists, continuing the cycle of exploitation. In this video, we will look at the events and activities of how 3 of these traitors betrayed and sold their countries to Western exploitation while compounding the cycle of bad leadership and poverty for decades. Compaoré, who was sentenced to life imprisonment by a Burkina Faso court in 2022 for the murder of Thomas Sankara. Here's how their story began. Compaoré first met Thomas Sankara in a military training camp in Morocco in 1976, and the two became close friends. In 1981, Compaoré was appointed head of the National Commando Training Center at Pau. Meanwhile, his friend Thomas Sankara resigned from his government post in 1982 to protest policy decisions and became deeply involved in national politics. A year later, during a power struggle that led to Sankara's imprisonment, Compaoré rallied the commando unit at Pau. With assistance from Ghana and Libya, he launched a coup on August 4, 1983, that made Sankara the head of state, alongside 2 other military commanders. Compaoré, who initially seemed modest and humble, was willing to leave the public affairs of politics to the more dynamic Sankara and the other 2 co-architects in 1984. However, this changed in 1987 when conflicts over security and strategic concerns arose. By this time, Sankara's regime was already facing significant challenges, particularly from the elite. The city of Ouagadougou was flooded with hateful flyers distributed by unions and student organizations with whom Sankara had open clashes. Determined to root out corruption, Sankara established public courts that prosecuted nearly 1,000 government officials and civil workers for misusing and stealing public funds. Many lost their jobs, and the country's elite grew to despise Sankara's bold reforms. These tensions culminated in an October 15, 1987 coup led by Compaoré, Zongo, and Lingani, which resulted in the assassination of Sankara and installed Compaoré as president. The day before his assassination, Sankara spent most of the night composing a speech in hopes of bridging the ideological divides within his government. He had called for a meeting of some of his officials at the national headquarters to discuss the way forward, but it turned out to be his last meeting. Compaoré denied involvement in the assassination of Sankara and others, claiming he was at home and very ill at the time. However, all evidence pointed to him as the one who ordered Sankara's killing. In April 2022, a Burkina Faso court handed Compaoré a life sentence in absentia for the assassination of Thomas Sankara and 12 others. The prosecution stated that Sankara was lured to his death at a meeting of the ruling National Revolutionary Council. Ballistics experts testified during the trial that Sankara was shot in the chest at least 7 times. Sankara's widow, Mariam Sankara, who attended the trial throughout, said the verdict represented justice and truth after a 35-year wait.
I think that now the people of Burkina Faso and the public opinion know who Thomas Sankara is, who is the man, who is the politician, what he did, what the people who assassinated him want. From that point of view, I am relieved because we know who he is.
In a letter read out to the media by the Burkina Faso government spokesman in July 2022, Blaise Compaoré asked the family of Thomas Sankara and the Burkinabe people for forgiveness for all the crimes committed under his rule. Compaoré said, "I ask the Burkinabe people for forgiveness for all the acts I may have committed during my tenure, and especially the family of my brother and friend Thomas Sankara. I take responsibility for and regret from the bottom of my heart all the suffering and tragedies experienced by all victims during my terms as leader of the country, and ask their families to grant me their forgiveness." Mobutu captured Lumumba while Tshombe killed him. This story won't be complete without an insight into the events that led to this betrayal, so let's do that. The closeness and friendship between Mobutu and Lumumba began during the fight for independence from the Belgians, led by Lumumba and his associates. Seeing that Congo's independence was inevitable, Mobutu joined Lumumba's party, Le Mouvement National Congolais, MNC. Despite many years working as a part-time paid informant for the Belgian colonial police, Mobutu rebranded himself as a passionate Congolese nationalist. Within a short while, he established a close friendship with Lumumba and even became his personal assistant. Mobutu began working alongside Lumumba as he petitioned the Belgian government for his country's independence. The negotiations for Congo's independence were far from amicable. Lumumba and his associates issued the Belgian government a 30-day ultimatum: either organize elections and grant Congo's independence, or face the risk of widespread violence. Fearing the possibility of a full-scale war of independence similar to Algeria's, the Belgians were compelled to agree to Lumumba's demands, and Congo ultimately gained its independence on June 30, 1960. Patrice Lumumba, at 35, became the first prime minister, while his rival, Joseph Kasavubu, was appointed as the ceremonial president. This positioned Lumumba as the most significant politician in the Democratic Republic of Congo, both during the fight for independence and afterward. The real issue, however, was not just his prominence, but his threat to Western interests, particularly those of Belgium and the US, in Congo's internal affairs and resources. This was compounded by the ethnic conflicts that arose following independence. Within its first 7 days as an independent state, an army revolt escalated into a full-blown civilian massacre, leaving Lumumba's government struggling to maintain control. Sensing vulnerability, opposition parties swiftly began questioning the legitimacy of Lumumba's administration, and several secessionist groups threatened to tear the country apart. Amid the chaos, Lumumba's rivals in the resource-rich Katanga and South Kasai regions saw an opportunity to seize power and immediately initiated attempts to secede from the newly independent Congo. Seeking to protect their own interests, Belgian operatives began collaborating with the Katangese rebels, viewing Katanga as a stronghold from which they could eventually overthrow Lumumba's government and establish a pro-Belgian unified Congolese government in the capital, Leopoldville. By the end of its second week as an independent state, Congo was in dire straits. Internal security had collapsed, the army was in disarray, and the white minority of Belgian civil servants, doctors, and teachers began fleeing to Belgium. The rebels in Katanga and South Kasai continued threatening to fragment the country. In desperation, Lumumba dismissed all Belgian officers in the army and appointed his former personal aide, Joseph Mobutu, as Army Chief of Staff. Despite Mobutu's limited military training during his 7 years in the colonial army, his ability to gain Lumumba's trust earned him his first major step toward absolute power. As the situation deteriorated, Lumumba publicly accused the Belgians of orchestrating the crisis and sought assistance from the United Nations. Unsatisfied with the UN's response, Lumumba quickly turned to the Soviet Union for military support in a desperate bid to restore internal order. Unfortunately for him, this move would ultimately lead to his downfall. Lumumba had long been on the CIA's radar as a suspected communist sympathizer. With his appointment as Congo's prime minister, Washington was on high alert against the threat of increased Soviet influence in the region. When Lumumba sought help from the Soviet Union, the Americans felt their suspicions were confirmed. This aligned perfectly with Belgian and U.S. interests. Both agreed on the necessity of removing Lumumba. The only question was how to execute it. The answer was closer than they thought. Lumumba's newly appointed Army Chief of Staff, Mobutu. While most saw chaos, Mobutu saw a golden opportunity. An opportunity to deceive, betray his people, become a puppet, enrich himself, and fast-track his political ambitions. It was an opportunity to end the career of the most vibrant leader the Democratic Republic of Congo had ever seen. By aligning himself with American and Belgian interests, Mobutu realized he could leverage their military support to consolidate power for himself, creating a mutually beneficial relationship with two of the world's most powerful nations. While Lumumba continued to accuse the Belgians of sabotage and sought to rally nationalist sentiment, Mobutu publicly denounced Lumumba as a communist sympathizer and blamed him for the chaos in the Congolese army. In collaboration with President Kasavubu, the Belgians, and the Americans, Mobutu orchestrated the capture and secret execution of the very man who had elevated him to power.
A new chapter begins in the dark and tragic history of the Congo with the return to Leopoldville of deposed Premier Lumumba, following his capture by crack commandos of strongman Colonel Mobutu. Taken to Mobutu's headquarters, past a jeering, threatening crowd, Lumumba was impassive at this lowest ebb of his stormy career. Mobutu watched as his troops manhandled Lumumba, but promised the pro-red Lumumba a fair trial on charges of inciting the army to rebellion. Lumumba was removed to an army prison outside the capital, as his supporters in Stanleyville seized control of Oriental province and threatened a return of disorder. Before that, Lumumba suffered more indignities, including being forced to eat a speech, which he restated his claim to be the Congo's rightful premier. Even in bonds, Lumumba remains a dangerous prisoner, storm center of savage loyalties and equally savage opposition.
On January 17, 1961, Mobutu flew a captive Lumumba to Katanga, where Chombe and his associates, accompanied by Belgian officials and mercenaries, brutally beat him for hours. Chombe was covered in Lumumba's blood by the time they were finished. Lumumba was then driven to a remote location and murdered, along with 2 members of his political party. An account reported hearing Lumumba ask, "You're going to kill us?" Franz Verscheurer, a local police commissioner, simply replied, "Yes." After the men were dead, the killers poured sulfuric acid on the bodies. One of the Belgians present, Gerard Soete, took Lumumba's molars and a finger as trophies. 6 days after his appointment as Major General, Mobutu seized power by overthrowing President Joseph Kasavubu and his Prime Minister. Mobutu went on to rule the Democratic Republic of Congo, which he later renamed Zaire, for over 3 decades. Tshombe, on the other hand, with the assistance of the US and Belgium, became Prime Minister in 1964, but went into exile in 1965